Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Swiatek captures her first title on home soil.
Fritz triumphs in Atlanta.
And Zverev wins his first title in 2 years in Hamburg.
Kim, Chris, today is the 31st of July and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. Wimbledon is over. We can look forward now to the North American hard court swing. Well, we're not there just yet. We're in this sort of weird middle ground. We've still got some clay tournaments. We've got some hard court tournaments as well. Swiatek's won a 250, which has never happened before. So, there's still lots of interesting things to talk about. And we are back as a three.
We are. And Chris, you're back from all your travels, globe-trotting around Europe for the tennis.
Never more than 2 hours from Copenhagen, though. Pretty much. Well, no, that's not true. 4 hours for Hamburg. But yes, I'm back. And that very weird section of the tour seems to be where I thrive, Joel. So thank goodness for the in-between bit.
It's really hard to know what I feel this part of the tour is called. Like, is it post-Wimbledon? Is it pre-US Open? Does it even need a name? I'm just confused. I don't know.
Is it like Twixmas?
Oh, it could be. Or all the tournaments going to change, though, from clay to hard? Is it on the way out? That's the big question.
Yeah, I do you know what? I honestly just want it to be on its way out. I feel like it just needs a clean break and we don't have that at the moment, and I think it should just be hard courts now. Forget the clay. I
love the clay though, so I'm all for it, but
there's too many hard courts as it is. I'm for the clay as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, we're going to be talking hard court events, we're going to be talking clay court events, we're going to be talking combined events as well, because we've got Washington ATP WTA 500 coming up next week, which is a first. We've also got some news in relation to Svitolina and Victoria Azarenka and having a crowd announcement before their match. So yeah, there's lots and lots of stuff to sink our teeth into as usual.
Absolutely. And also some off-court highlights, shall we say. Joel, you were really excited to tell us all on WhatsApp in the week that Nick Kyrgios has got a massive tattoo on his back, for one. I mean, quite a lot has been going on off court, hasn't it?
Chris didn't think this was real. I didn't even think this was real, actually.
I was shocked. Honestly, this is as bad as Ben Affleck's tattoos, I've got to be honest.
But if our listeners aren't aware, Nick Kyrgios has got his whole back tattooed with Pokémon. So, you know, Pokémon, a staple of my childhood. I don't know about your childhood, but a staple of my childhood. And so, yeah, it's quite a visually interesting graphic. I did have to count that. I think 9 Pokémon in total.
And what are you setting par at?
Well, I was tempted to make it a little bit of a par.
I know my
courts,
Snorlaxes from my Charizards.
I mean, they are all Generation 1. You've got Charizard, Gyarados, Lapras, Alakazam, Blastoise, Mewtwo, Gengar, Dragonite, and Snorlax. But, I mean, yeah, what? I didn't know he was such a gamer.
I mean, it says 1 hour, though. It says just a full line's just 1 hour. That's never a good sign if a tattoo that big takes an hour, I have to say.
Maybe it's a wash-off one. It will, tomorrow it'll be gone.
I don't think it is a wash-off, Kim.
I mean, I only know Pikachu as a Pokemon. I've got no idea about any other Pokemon, but I'm slightly bemused as to why Pikachu isn't featuring in this tattoo.
That was the disappointment, right? That there were only 9 Pokemon. Yeah, we didn't get any Pikachu. I was gutted. There was no. What's my favourite one? Doug Trio.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we're getting quite niche here.
We're getting really niche.
We're getting niche here.
Listeners. But I'll tell you one thing if you do see the image, it does look a bit like when you're writing on an envelope and you run out of space at the end. The further you get down his back, it does seem to get a bit bunched up. So his body, his choice, but this is a very particular choice, I would say. And it's a good job they have to wear clothes to play tennis.
Yeah, and going back onto the tennis court, my, I guess, thing that gave me a bit of amusement this week, and I mean, I shouldn't laugh because it's to do with an injury, but it wasn't an injury to a player. It's an injury to an umpire during a match. So Mohamed Layani, everyone's sort of I don't know, most famous umpire that we all know on the tour. He had to take a medical timeout of his own in the Hamburg final.
Of course he did. Of course he did, Kim.
Had to make it about himself. Didn't
I
he?
know, right?
him.
Yeah, taking over. He slipped as he came off his chair to inspect a ball mark, and then had to get treatment for it seemed to be like, I think, a foot injury. So I think it was a cut. I don't think it was super serious. But I just thought, has that ever happened before where an umpire has needed the trainer to come on rather than the players? I thought it was so, such a different perspective.
I feel like because it's on a clay court where marks need to be inspected, it was almost like that's the worst court surface to get a medical timeout for your ankle. You want it on a hard court where you can just sort of rely on Hawkeye challenge to just sort of mean that you don't have to get out of your chair.
Well, you've got to do your stretches, don't you, as well? Got to make sure you're limbered up for this, because they've really got to do quite the move, because, you don't want to interrupt the play. And maybe in his haste to get down, but I would say, having been there this week, he does like to stop-start. He likes to look like he's going to get down, and then he doesn't go because they didn't actually want him to. So maybe if he just waited a little bit longer, we could have avoided this type of injury.
Wow.
It's that jarring motion. They do get off their chairs quite fast, though, I have to say. A lot of the umpires. I'm always quite impressed at their speed. So, occupational hazard. I hope that was logged in the health and safety log.
Maybe there needs to be like an escalator type version rather than like a stepped. I know we get like a stepped version of the chair umpire, and that is the norm. But maybe there needs to be some sort of evolution that doesn't involve steps and the potential to cut your
like
foot on
electronic line
on a step.
calls.
Or a slide, like in a park.
Oh, a slide.
Oh, a slide would be good. I'd
That
love to see
would be
Leone
great.
slide
into
down.
a ball pool. No,
Yes.
that's something slightly different. But yeah,
One for the next gen finals.
yes, I'd love to see it.
Oh, slide on the side of a chair umpire. Yeah, we need to make that happen.
Chris, what was your sort of irreverent highlight of the week?
Well, I was also in Hamburg, and maybe another reason to potentially for Leone's injury is that there was a lot of rain in Hamburg this week, but there is a roof. It's got this wonderful canvas roof that sort of folds out like an umbrella, and I will post something of that on our socials because it is quite wonderful. But the roof is, I would say, a bit like if your dad had put up a gazebo for a barbecue and it started raining. It's very temperamental, and rain does get inside. So there was actually a rain delay during the final for a tournament that had its roof closed because the poor spectators were getting so drenched. It was causing so much commotion because it was coming through holes in the roof that they actually had to stop. So I just
That's
thought...
not good.
It's a cheap roof option, I've got to be honest, because it's a bit of canvas
so
that goes across. It's
budget
pretty,
option.
I would say it closes very quickly. You don't have to stop or adjust the time, but then you do get moments when if it is raining, it lets the rain in. So I witnessed a rain delay in a court which had a roof. And so I think for that's something to be mentioned on the podcast.
That is, that's definitely worthy of a mention, Chris. I hope you survived all the...
But maybe that's why he slipped, though. Sorry, I should have said that,
rain.
because of the rain gets in through the roof.
Oh, dearie me. Well, let's talk about what happened in Hamburg, shall we? Because we did have Sascha Zverev winning the men's event for the first time. He beat Laszlo Djere in straight sets in the final. This is his first title since November 2021. Obviously, he had that quite nasty injury, which took him out for a lot of last season. But, he's won on home soil here without dropping a set. So, Chris, you were there. What did you make of Zverev's performances throughout the week?
Well, I've seen him play the last couple of weeks, and I think it wasn't the best field in Hamburg. If I'm being completely honest, for a 500, it was probably one of the weakest 500 semi-final lineups I've seen when you compare it to this week's 500 on the hard courts. So I think he was probably the best of the field. But in terms of the tennis that he played, if you cast your mind back to sort of the end of season finals that year, it was tennis from a different league to what he's playing now. It was almost a defensive baseliner out there, which is not how Zverev plays. It's kind of a big serve with a defensive style now. He doesn't really let rip anymore. I'm not sure if it's because he doesn't trust it, but he can see him kind of getting out hit on the court, which is obviously not the way he plays his best game. So for me, I wasn't particularly impressed. I think just in the final, for Laszlo, it just got a bit much in terms of everyone being against him at a home tournament. And the pressure of not necessarily always being in finals or having form this year kind of got to him. But it was a bit of a lackluster final and semi-finals, I have to say, because even in the semis where we got some real good points against Fils in the semi-final right at the end there, again, it just never really got going. So I think for this whole kind of tournament and lead up, I think it'd be much more interesting to see where his form is at when he gets to play some more top players in the States.
Yeah. And do you think, I mean, Joel, what do you make of Zverev this week? You know, he's now back into the top 10. Do you think he's going to progress onwards from here? I know the field wasn't the strongest, but do you think just getting that first title is going to boost him? Will we see him at the, tour finals come November?
Yeah, I think this was a great result for him. A great, I think, journey back from, what was such a bad injury. And I think, he's obviously not let any of the off-court things going on in his life distract and affect his game. And, there are top players, I think, in a similar position to him who haven't actually won a big title above a 250 in the last year. I think I was reading like Yannick Sinner, for example, hasn't won above a 250 in the last 12 months. So for him to go out and win a 500, it's an impressive feat. But I always come back to this point because of those allegations against him. As a fan, I don't know how much I can talk about this, how much can I like this result. It's really, really, really tricky because I know that, as I say, there are these things going on at the moment, and it's really hard not let that influence my sort of perception of Zverev, even though nothing has necessarily come of action at the moment. But I'm just like, am I allowed to like this result?
It's a
I know
very
what you
strange
mean.
situation, I was going to say, because being there, knowing what
this was his hometown, wasn't it? Or this is his home tournament?
Yeah, it's where he was born. It's not necessarily where he's always lived in the past, but he is celebrated there in a way that he isn't celebrated in other places, I would say. So this was very unusual because obviously there's a big crowd to support him. He is a big name in Boston. There was a big crowd, but this was kind of on another level. And it does just feel very strange because I was with some people who weren't in the know about some of the allegations that have been made against him in the past or the new round of allegations, and they couldn't believe it based on how it was being received. And so for our listeners that might not be in the know, we'll make them aware of some of the facts surrounding this, is that previously there were allegations made by his ex-girlfriend, Olya Sharapova, and what happened was that they've been investigated now after a very lengthy investigation, but there was deemed to be not enough evidence. That does not mean they did not happen. That just means that they did not find enough evidence that they would be able to take action against it. He celebrated that as a victory, and then the mother of his child, who he doesn't have in his life anymore, has just launched further allegations at the public prosecutor's office in Berlin seeking a penalty order. This is about alleged bodily harm. That's all that's been said. He has denied it. He said that is with his lawyers now, and that he has always denied these allegations. So again, nothing has been, this is all alleged at the moment, but there are these allegations that follow him. And for fans, it's something that they don't think has been addressed properly. And it took a lot to be addressed in the first place for the first time round. So it's very hard to know how to feel. I think you're right, John, in terms of when there is nothing definitive. There has been no further elaboration on the allegations yet for this latest round, and it just makes it all a very odd situation to witness.
Yeah, it's very unsavoury, and yeah, it is an awkward perspective, I think. Should you support him? And there's other players, there's Seyboth Wild, I think, who had a good run lately
Kyrgios
and has similar
admitted
allegations,
But Zverev is now back in the top 10. And Kim, you said, do I think he could be in the ATP Tour finals at the end of the season? Well, it looks like in the rankings at the moment, the 8th spot has kind of 3 players vying for it. There's Zverev, Ruud and Taylor Fritz. And I wanted to ask you both, who of those 3 do you feel like could get that? If it kind of works out that way, who do you think is in top position to get that final spot?
Well, Casper Ruud keeps getting like breadstick lately, or bageled even. He's had some strange scorelines. He lost to Arthur Fee in Hamburg and has had some weird matches. So I don't know, question marks out. But he was going to get to the US Open final like last year and just creep in and make up the numbers. And Taylor Fritz, he's won a title this week, which we'll get onto later.
I don't think Zverev is playing the tennis of top 8 at the moment. I think the semi-final run, I don't think was that impressive this time compared to last time at the French. And I think this result, having witnessed it, I've seen him play a lot better tennis probably 3 years ago. And I think the tour has moved on a little bit since then, but maybe it's not the best advert for the tennis tour if someone who's not playing anywhere near their best is still, in the top 10. I think that would be a question mark from me. So I think Fritz will be there.
Well, let's wait and see on that one how they get on for the rest of the year. I mean, let's stay in Hamburg because we did have the women's tournament there as well. It was a joint event, which is great. And Arantxa Russ won the women's event, 6-love, 7-6. She won in the final against German teenager Noha Akugwe, who I've not heard of before, I have to say. But obviously, this
debut on the main draw.
Debut, yeah, only 19 years old. Also her hometown, so really great for local players. Despite obviously all the hoo-ha around Zverev, for local fans, they had some great success. But yeah, it wasn't her day in the end. Russ got the better of her. But what a fantastic run to the final, and also fantastic for Russ because she's one of those players that has been around for a while.
A long time.
Yeah,
long time. I still remember when she beat Kim Clijsters at French Open
2011, second round.
2011.
Yeah,
which is wild.
So she'd have been very young then. She'd have been in the exact same situation as Noma was for this one in terms of the fact that she would have been 19 then, if my maths is correct, maybe 20. But it's amazing to think she's been around that long, and I would say the stories are definitely more amazing than the tennis for that one. I think it was a case where you could really tell this was a first final, but also such a big opportunity for Russ to take home a title finally. So I think it got a bit cagey at times. But nevertheless, there were some great stories coming out of Hamburg, despite some of the controversy that's going on at the moment, and great crowds for a 250 final. So I think that was a real positive, was that so many people turned up for that match, and that was the first match that was played that day, and it was still pretty much a full stadium, and it's the largest tennis stadium in Germany. So what a great experience for both of those players. And if you're going to win a 250, it makes it feel like a 500 in terms of the audience side for Russ. So very nice scenes there.
It's an incredible story, I think, for perseverance on the tour because, I was reading a little bit about her history in terms of, she was a junior champion. She won the Australian Open and it didn't necessarily quite work for her in terms of that transition from juniors to seniors. And she's just plugged away season after season, year after year. She's had a few injuries as well. So it's, I think, a really nice achievement for her to finally get that title victory, and you could see how much it meant to her in her celebration. And Kim, as you said, for Akuga, it's kind of, I think, the fact that this was her debut wild card, first ever tour event to get to the final. That's a very impressive showing. So I think everyone sort of went home happy there, and I can't help but feel pleased for both of them. Yeah,
Akuga, obviously her first WTA main draw, and she didn't have to play any kind of seeded players, but she could have lost very early on. She had to save a match point in her second round against Storm Hunter, and came from a set down in the quarterfinals as well. So fighting her way through, really fantastic, and let's hope she doesn't have to wait as long as Russ did to get her first title. Hopefully it's going to be a much shorter time before she does, but we'll definitely be looking out for her because at 19, very excited to see what she can do. And I think with Russ, we don't really, I don't think this is going to become the start of something necessarily, but it's just really nice that she's finally kind of ticked that box, isn't it?
And a career high ranking at 32.
Yeah. I mean, there was a name blasted around on kind of all the, news sites comparing, Russ being the oldest first time finalist on the WTA Tour since 2007, when a 34-year-old got to the final in Guangzhou in China. And that was Sipora Obzilla. Have either of you heard of her? I mean, probably slightly before you got...
I had a poster up of her on my wall.
When you got into tennis.
I really did. No, I'm joking.
Of course
I didn't.
You did, Chris.
She
I want to see the draw. I want to see
the
the draw for that event. Yeah.
That's one for par for the course if we're really being serious.
Anyone from that draw.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to Google her because that's just beyond me. But I mean, I think our defence is that none of us were probably really avidly following tennis back then in 2007.
It was before the podcast.
It was well before
tennis didn't
Weekly.
exist before the podcast.
Oh dear. Well, let's have a look at what else happened on the European clay last week. We had Umag as well out in Croatia, where we had Alexei Popyrin up against Stan Wawrinka. Popyrin winning in 3 sets to get his second tour title, coming from a set down. I mean, it was a classic sort of youth versus experience matchup in the final. We all know what Stan Wawrinka has done in the past, and we saw Popyrin, didn't we, at the Boodles prior to Wimbledon? But Joel, what did you make of this matchup and the final that we saw here? Popyrin winning in 3 sets out in Umag.
I thought he was going to retire, to be honest. He really hurt his leg, injured his leg, and I thought, that would have been Wawrinka with all of his experience, he would have been able to make the most of that and come out as champion. And you saw how I think disappointed he was in the result, because he cried in the presentation. But yeah, for Popyrin, I think he's been on a great trajectory this season. He had that really good win at the start in the Australian Open against Taylor Fritz in 5 sets, and I think that really gave him the confidence and belief that he can pull out and be a big match player. And we spoke to him at the Boodles, and I feel like he was a little bit kind of shy and a little bit kind of quite softly spoken, but this match I think showed that he can play some big game tennis, and I think Wawrinka will be disappointed. I think he didn't maybe make the most of that injury. I don't know, maybe try a new strategy, bring out some more drop shots and get someone injured running more than he did. That would be my only, I think, criticism, which I was a little bit surprised by given his experience.
Yeah, I think almost in a way, Popyrin had to change his, tactics, shorten the rallies, and obviously that proved very successful. And I guess you never know how you're going to deal with. You've got a potential injury, and also it can affect the other player, can't it? So maybe Stan saw that he was suffering and thought, and it just kind of affected his game a bit. So yeah, well done, Alexei Popyrin. It's great title to pick up. Umag's been quite a historic tournament throughout the years. Let's look at the ladies' action from last week. Chris, we had Lausanne, a WTA 250. This was won by Elisabetta Cocciaretto, another first-time tour winner, along with Arantxa. Cocciaretto was the second seed here. She beat Clara Burel of France 7-5, 4-6, 6-4. So they're both quite young, I guess, up-and-coming players, both 22 years of age. Cocciaretto being the higher-ranked player. Took almost 3 hours to beat her, but Cocciaretto winning her first tour title. What did you make of the final that we had in Lausanne and the week, the Cocciaretto put together?
Yeah, I think as we're seeing this sort of part of the tour, we're seeing so many first-time finalists. I think last year's, it's not been that long, last week's episode, it felt like everyone was a first-time finalist. And again, we're having kind of a lot of first-time titleists this week. So I think it's always nice to see a breakthrough. It's always nice to see a competitive, final. The final in Hamburg was... obviously, there was a bagel involved. This was very, very different in terms of it going the distance with a 7-5, 4-6, 6-4 result. And she really kind of battled her way through the tournament. So you couldn't say that she didn't earn it, because she beat, in the first round, the Swiss wildcard, who I'm sure I'll be saying this wrong, but Naif, I want to say. But she's had a fantastic Hopman Cup reaching the final. So although this does look like maybe she hasn't had to play anyone who's that highly ranked, I still think she's had to get it done, and she's had to fight her way through. And it just shows you just how much a tournament can change as you go through. You lose the top seed, the tournament's wide open, and you can bag a title. So I thought it was quite a nice result, really.
I feel like this was one of those draws anyone could say, I could win this.
We should predict 250s instead of slams, and we'd have even less success.
Oh, God. Well, one player who didn't have a great week, I thought, was Leoli Jean-Jean, because she got double bageled by Emma Navarro, which definitely caught my eye on the scoreboard. But I suppose little bit of controversy coming out of Lausanne. We had a match between Mira Andreeva and Diana Yastremska in the first round. Andreeva won the match very comfortably, but there was a sort of very dissatisfied Yastremska, who asked the WTA to sanction Ondreeva because Ondreeva has apparently been liking some Instagram posts that show support to Russia and the war and Putin, which obviously Yastremska, being Ukrainian, is not going to be happy about. She asked the WTA to intervene to sanction Ondreeva. Joel, do you think that's the WTA's responsibility to get involved in what players are liking on social media? Do you think something should have been done in this situation when, it wasn't, nothing was done?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I still feel like the WTA are wary of not picking sides, even if, they want to show as much support as possible for Ukraine. I don't think they can be shown to be picking sides. And I think if you get into kind of micromanaging people's profiles, how deep do you take that? Do you take that across every single player available? So I think the WTA probably were right maybe to stay clear, but certainly if you're a Ukrainian, you're definitely not impressed with the activity, and it just shows, I think, that it's still a very real thing on the tour that can happen. It can happen in a round one match, it can happen at a Grand Slam quarterfinal, it can happen at any time, and I think can really kind of open up a conversation. And Yastremska has always, I think, been banging on the drum, particularly on these moments, because she's obviously very passionate about the cause and the effort going on in Ukraine. So yeah, it was a bit tricky. I was a little bit surprised though, because obviously Mira Andreeva, I feel like she's been like the golden child of tennis on the women's tour over the last few months. But for some fans, this is going to bring a new light onto her.
Yeah, I was surprised because she's not based in Russia. I think she's based out in France, has been for a while, but clearly, she isn't as against the war as some of her fellow compatriots have been.
Or it raises the question in terms of, you could obviously say that your account was hacked. There are obviously multiple reasons to explain this. Does she actually control her own social media? We've seen this quite regularly. I think it does raise the question to what extent the WTA will be willing to get involved in situations like this, because we've seen with Potapova in the past. We also have seen just last week that Vera Zvonareva was denied entry to Poland because of reasons of state security and public safety, despite the fact she'd kind of had a no-war visor at the Miami Open in March 2022. So it does seem like they don't have a clear, and this is what we always say with these things, there needs to be clear guidelines and there needs to be stuck to it, because if it is a case where it's on a case-by-case basis, it's almost too late by the time anything does come out about it. And the sanctions don't actually have implications for the players who are actually showing their support for Russia, kind of making a mockery of saying that you are doing anything for Ukrainian athletes at all. So I do have a lot of sympathy for Yastremska here, because if there's no explanation, then it doesn't feel like she should have to play this match at all, because it's against what the WTA said that they are promoting and the way that they're handling the situation. So I'm glad she went public with it, but it's a shame that she had no choice but to. But especially in Europe, you can see tensions are still high. We'll talk about it in the Czech Republic coming up. But again, there still does not seem to be the clarity from the WTA, and it continues not to take action.
Yes, and will they ever? I don't know. It is a tricky line. How much do they intrude on someone's personal space and actions? How, as a governing body of a sport, how much can they do? Be interesting to hear what our listeners think on that one as well. Let's look at the hardcore action. We had the Warsaw Open, where Swiatek.
Do you not mean the Swiatek Open? With
her title, yeah, Iga Swiatek Open. So her first ever 250 title, actually. So, another one to tick off, I suppose. She's kind of ticking all boxes. But she absolutely thrashed Laura Siegmund in the final. 6-love, 6-1. The bakery was well and truly up and running and baking. Very dominant from Swiatek. She didn't lose a set during the course of the tournament. Fairly straightforward draw for her, no difficulties. The expected winner is what we got. Chris, what did you make of Swiatek, throughout the course of this week? Obviously, this is a draw that, there was only so many top players she could beat, because they're only allowed, one top 10 player per 250. So if she's there, she's not going to have anyone. You're not going to have anyone on a similar ranking to you, are you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Iga doesn't always play her best tennis at home. I think it's fair to say. I think it's always a struggle when you are the top seed playing at home and all the expectation is there. She said that it's not easy. Obviously, she lost to Garcia right at the start of the Renaissance when it was on clay.
I think she said that she felt as much pressure as like the French Open final playing at home.
Well, it's her dad's tournament, isn't it? I mean, it's probably a big moneymaker. A lot of deals are being done there as well. And a lot of people want to see her play. She's very, very popular there. So I can understand that it's a very different pressure, but it still is a lot of pressure. But in terms of the weekend and the finals, I think that the big story has to be that
Heather Watson getting to a quarterfinal.
Well, that's a big story too. She also won the doubles title, but Lara Sigmund had to play 2 matches in one day. She played for over 6 hours.
Wow.
The day before, winning both in 3 sets. She beat Maria 5-7, 6-3, 6-4, and then she had to come back onto court to beat Stefanini 7-6, 5-7, 6-3. So if you had a ticket for semi-finals day, you would have seen over 6 hours of Lara Sigmund. So, I mean, honestly, the fact that she
sounds
got
like
to
your
final,
dream, Chris.
I was live streaming it from Hamburg, but I mean, genuinely,
You're not joking, are you?
No, I'm not joking. But what an incredible feat to be able to do that, and then it really just meant that the poor Sigmund reaching the final. I mean, getting one game is never unimpressive against Iga.
Yeah.
But especially when you had 7 hours the day before. So special mention there, I think has to go to Lara.
I was going to say the Warsaw Open needed the roof from Hamburg, but based on what you said earlier, maybe they didn't really need it.
Just honestly, a larger gazebo would do.
But yeah, going back to Heather Watson, great week for her. She won the doubles with Janina Wickmeyer, who is a classic player. But one thing that sort of I've been reading about is some comments that are being made about Iga Swiatek from an ex-player called Jimmy Arias. I have to say I've not heard of him before. I don't know if I'm embarrassing myself by admitting that, but I don't know who he is. Former player, apparently. But he's had a go at Swiatek to say, I don't think she's been great for women's tennis because she wears her hat so low that you can't see her face or eyes during a match. I mean, I'm sorry, but this to me just screams
what a load of tosh.
Man telling woman what
John
to
Infidel
wear.
From the US, it feels like a little bit like their equivalent.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know who he is, but like, I mean, who's he to comment on how whether she wants to wear a hat or whether she should? I mean, for crying out loud.
She's got sponsorship deals on running. Want that hat on?
I think more players should wear hats because the sun's just going to be damaging their eyes all the time.
Honestly, every tournament I go to, I worry about it. I'm like, if I can't see the ball without shades and a hat on, what chances do they have?
Yeah.
But it's only going to cause problems
I'm
later.
so confused because he said, I want to see her personality. I feel like she's shown her personality in abundance, like through interviews and on-court,
I'm not sure he's on social media, this Jimmy. I think maybe he's a bit old school. So I think...
Has he watched Breakpoint? She's on that. Go and watch that, Jimmy.
That's your homework.
Me.
Please report back afterwards. or never say anything again, either or.
Yeah, exactly.
He is part of the Tennis Channel's network coverage, so that is where that has come from. But very, very surprising and not the take I believe in. I think Nick Kyrgios was agreeing with us, which I know we don't necessarily agree with what everything Nick Kyrgios says, but
or does, like the tattoo.
Once, agree with him on this point.
Yeah, we wouldn't all get Pokémon tattoos.
And if it was a 6-love, 6-1 match and poor Laura Sigmund wasn't able to move, maybe he just said it as a very stupid comment. So benefit of the doubt, I guess we should give him in some ways.
Perhaps. Let's look at what happened in Atlanta, out in the hard courts in the US. We had Taylor Fritz winning the title over Alexander Vukic, Australian. And yeah, Fritz, he's back to winning titles. Rather an iffy clay and grass season, but you know he's back to getting that victory. He did squander some match points on route, but got the job done in 3 sets over Vukic. And yeah, it's his first title since March, so he'll be pleased to kind of kickstart his US Open like hard court swing with a title win in Atlanta. Joel, comments on Taylor Fritz throughout the week?
Yeah, it was a good result for him. I think, as you said, back on track, I think, for this season because, he's not had great Grand Slam results. I mean, Australian Open and Wimbledon, I think he only reached round 2 and then left. So I think this is a good confidence boost for him ahead of the North American swing, home tournaments going up to the US Open. And it was a tough battle in that final. And I think he did very well, I think, to win that in 3, given he squandered match points in that second set. I thought Vukic had shifted the momentum his way. So, I was impressed with Fritz, how he dealt with that sort of moment at the end of the second set, start of the third, and was able to come through and clinch it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a note on Brits out in action in Atlanta. We had Dan Evans had a bit of a shocking loss against Kurt.
He was like 6-3, 5-2 up against Kurt for 40 love and lost. He is not having a good time on the tour at the moment, unfortunately.
No, but Nishikori back and he's making waves already. Made the quarterfinals, which is really nice to see. Nishikori back on the tour. He did lose to Fritz in straights, but I mean, very good achievement for the renaissance of Nishikori. Perhaps we can start using the word for him now. But yeah, Fritz very much at home in Atlanta, home support, running to the title. So well done, Taylor Fritz. Let's take a very quick break now, but do join us in the second half where we'll be discussing the Czech Republic banning Russians and Belarusians for the Prague Open. The news that there will be a crowd announcement before Azarenka against Svitolina. And also we'll be taking a look at all of the draws for this week's action, including the first ever combined ATP and WTA 500 event in Washington, D.C. So do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. Now we're going to move on to a par for the courts. Joel, you have par for the courts for me and Chris. You've been so excited in telling us all day, all weekend, in fact, that you've got this up your sleeve.
I've not stopped smiling.
He's had this planned for us.
I've not stopped smiling since I conjured.
This is going to be horrible. I can tell if he's this happy, Kim.
So what have you got for us? I'm so curious.
So before I get into it, on its own, I would maybe expect Chris to get 100% because this is very much in his home territory. But Kim, I do have confidence in you as well.
Good to hear, Kim, isn't it?
Oh, thank you so much.
So the topic I have for you both and our listeners in our Par for the Courts back and forth is players to have played Serena Williams in a Grand Slam ladies singles final.
Oh.
And there are, and I looked at this on Wikipedia, there are 18 players in total who have played Serena Williams in a Grand Slam ladies singles final. And I would like you to tell me as many of those as possible.
Okay, that is a good one, actually.
That is a good one.
Okay, so this is back and forth. So who's going first, me or you, Chris?
I'll go first, Kim. But the rules would be that if I get one wrong, you've got to get one right to win it. I think someone pointed out. One of our listeners understood the competition a little bit better than we did. Well, there's only one person you can start with and should start with, and that's Venus Williams.
Correct, yes.
Thanks for that, Joel.
Well, the first player that came to my mind was Lucy Shavajova.
Correct, yes. That is a correct answer. I thought you would leave that in your pocket, but yes,
no,
that is
one
of the more obscure answers.
Kim likes to show off early and then lose on a Russian name.
Yeah.
So I'll save her the trouble and go for Vera Vonareva.
Very good. That was at Wimbledon, I believe. But yes, that is on the list.
Simona Halep.
Correct.
I completely forgot. Oh, yes. She Halep won that one, of course. She can win
Wimbledon,
them and lose them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, she has lost some.
I will go for Maria Sharapova.
Correct.
Oh, I'm struggling now. How am I struggling? This is bad. She's destroyed so many players, and I've...
Think about the recent ones, Kim.
I know, that's what... Yeah, I'm just... Oh, the ones she's lost as well. Yeah, Kerber.
Correct. Yes, Angie Kerber.
Sam Stosur.
Correct. Yes, Sam Stosur's on the list.
Bianca Andreescu.
Very good. The last player to play Serena Williams in a Grand Slam final, Bianca Andreescu. Correct.
I'm going to go for the returning Dane, Caroline Wozniacki.
Very good. Correct answer.
Can you tell I'm feeling confident, Kim?
I think Kim's struggling.
Oh, I want to say a Russian name, Chris, but you've put me off now.
Don't do it. I wouldn't say don't do it this time. Oh, maybe don't do it. That could have been a semi-final, Kim. You're going to have to say it now.
I was going to say Svetlana Kuznetsova.
That is an incorrect answer, Kim. You are out.
It's felt like the quarterfinal of the French they played that year. Was it 2008? That was a fantastic
I will say
match.
though, Kim, there is a
Dinara
Russian.
Safina.
There is a Russian
I thought
player.
you were going to say
There is a
her.
Russian player there, and Dinara Safina is on the list. You could have said that, Chris. Can you complete the board for me?
Hingis was the first one. I know that for sure.
Yep, correct.
We haven't said Davenport.
Yeah, very
That
good.
was
Davenport also on there.
That was an
Osaka?
Australian Open.
They never played in the final.
Naomi
They
Osaka,
did.
yeah.
Oh, yes, where everyone
US
booed.
Open,
Oh, of
US
course.
Open,
Oh,
yeah.
why did I not say her?
Who else do we have?
There's a few left.
Radwanska, that was in the
Very good.
Wimbledon final.
Which Radwanska?
Agnieszka.
Ursula? No. Who else am I thinking?
What about Petrova?
Never in a final.
No.
Justine Henin in the Australian Open
Very
final.
good. Yes,
Mauresmo?
Justine Henin. No Mauresmo. There are 2 names left that have not been said.
Azarenka.
Pliskova?
Sorry,
No.
3 names. Yes,
Oh,
Azarenka.
Azarenka.
Yeah. 2 names
else?
left.
Another US Open would be Jankovic.
Very good, Jelena Jankovic. I thought that was going to be the pointless answer, but yes, there's one more.
I don't know.
Ivanovic?
It's not Ivanovic.
What nationality?
Yeah.
Might give it away. I'm not giving you the nationality. I'll give you the tournament. I believe it happened at Wimbledon.
Okay.
And this player is not playing at the moment, is the hint I'm giving you and our
Bartley.
listeners.
Oh, so someone
No.
who's on a career hiatus, are we thinking?
3, 2,
Don't know.
1. Garbina Muguruza.
Oh. So
that
she got
happened
to a final
that happened
before.
At the French as well, though. That was 2 times.
Did that happen at the French?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just
No, it was
thinking
both. No,
Muguruza.
it was both.
Oh, was
It
it
was
both?
Wimbledon
Okay.
and
Well,
the French Open.
well, there you go. There you
But-
go. So the 18 in total, that was Hingis, Venus Williams, Sharapova, Davenport, Jankovic, Safina, Henin, Zvonareva, Stosur, Aga Radwanska, Azarenka, Wozniacki, Shavajeva, Muguruza, Kerber, Osaka, Halep, and Bianca Andreescu. Those were your 18.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Joel.
That was a very good one.
Did that live up to the hype? Did that live up to the hype?
It did.
Well, yes, it did.
Kim
I
went
did
out
enjoy
on a
that
Russian
one.
as usual, so they did
I
live
went
up to
out
the
on a
hype.
rogue Russian, as usual. Listeners, let us know
thing.
how you got on with that one. Hopefully better than I did. And let's have a look at what's in our mailbag this week. We've had Stephen Rankin get in touch again on email. Thank you very much, Stephen. He said, "Hi, Joel, Kim and Chris. Of all the players currently ranked between 50 and 100, who do you think has the potential to have a surprisingly deep run at this year's US Open? A la Chris Eubank style. P.S. You're all doing a fantastic job with the pod. I never miss it." Thank you very much, Stephen. That's very kind of you. And yeah, some food for thought. So players ranked between 50 and 100. I assume he means on the WTA and ATP tours. Joel, I'm coming to you first.
You just want
are
me
gonna
to
say?
get my terrible predictions out of the way first and just sort of make yours more acceptable. I just want to say Chris Eubanks again for some reason, but I think he's now in the top 30, so he's out of it. I will go with, on the men's side, Jack Draper, with the caveat that if his body holds up, which we just know it won't in 5-set tennis, but I'm going Jack Draper on the men's side. And then on the women's side, I'm going with Janina Wickmeyer. I think she had a very good... I mean, she got to the semis in Poland. She's got a lot of experience. I thought she's a very handy player. I watched her at Surbiton. So, yeah, I think she could do maybe like a little bit of a Peronkova come the US Open. So, yeah, I'm going Wickmeyer.
And Chris, who are you going for?
So I actually misread the question. So I'm going to cheat at this, and I'm going to say
How did you interpret this?
Yeah, how could it?
Well,
how else could it be?
I read the question before the new rankings came out. I'll say that.
Okay.
So this was correct as of yesterday, but I didn't realise the 50 to 100 was specific. But I was going to say Arthur Fils.
Okay, yeah.
Because I was very impressed with him, and I think he hasn't had that breakout result. He's won a tournament, but he hasn't had the breakout slam result yet. But I've got some other players in mind as well that I think could be interesting. On the women's side, I do think that double bagel from Emma Navarro, she's definitely putting some good results together. And another American, Peyton Stearns, I also think is playing pretty good tennis. So I'm going for some of the younger players who haven't broken through yet, whereas Joel's kind of going for the experience there. But Kim, we were all sent this question. Who did you put down?
Well, for the women, maybe I shouldn't say this, perhaps it's a bit controversial now, but Mira Andreeva, she's made waves at the French, at Wimbledon. Why shouldn't she go deep at the US? Just hopefully she's going to stay away from Instagram in the meantime, or Twitter, whichever social platform it was. And I think maybe on the men's side, someone like Zhizhen Zhang, who has been going up the rankings, has had quite a jump, just outside the top 50 at the moment. So I feel like he is due a kind of run to the second week. So yeah, I'd love for someone to come through, Chris Eubank style. I think, what he did at Wimbledon was great. And there's normally, a surprise package, isn't there? At every Grand Slam.
Botic van der Zandschulp type.
Botic van der Zandschulp. Or Tim van Rijthoven.
Oh,
what happened to him? Yeah.
It's not
I just don't think he's been able to stay fit.
Season's over.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, poor TVR.
Tim.
Anyway, thank you, Stephen, for your question. Listeners, we'd love to know what you think. Which players do you think are going to be making a deep run at the US Open? Let us know. And let's have a look at other talking points from the tours, because there's a couple of, again, politically themed talking points. So we've spoken already, about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and it's continuing to affect life on tour as well. The Czech Republic have banned Russians and Belarusian players from taking part in any event in the country, which will mean that obviously none of them will be able to compete at the Prague Open. So this was, starting today. We were expecting to see a handful of Russian and Belarusian players, but the government have approved a resolution banning athletes and revoking visas. So, obviously, Wimbledon didn't allow Russians and Belarusians last year. We kind of just assumed that everywhere else was allowing them. Now, obviously, the UK are. But yeah, what do you make of this? Do you think there might be further, instances of this, or is it just a one-off in Czech Republic?
I definitely wasn't expecting us to go from Wimbledon reverting away from their ban to tournaments now and countries individually now banning. So I think that's definitely a trajectory I wasn't expecting, in a similar way that I wasn't kind of expecting when there was that news about Ostapenko and Latvia actually saying they didn't want their athletes to be competing against people from Russia and Belarus. So I think it's definitely a case that I was surprised by this. I think the WTA has a responsibility to players in this situation, that they shouldn't end up being denied at the border. I think that should have been something that was communicated to them prior to this. I think, again, it is just down to managing situations like this. I think tournaments and countries, this is bigger than obviously purely just WTA, but the WTA events do span multiple countries, multiple territories, multiple governments. And I think the safety of players is of utmost importance, whether they are from any of the different countries that we're talking about here. And when it says that Czech police stopped a Russian player from entering the country ahead of the WTA Prague Open, you think, how did it get to this again? It's almost like Novak Djokovic arriving.
Well, that's exactly
in
what
Australia.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking this is like Novak Djokovic all over again, with not getting into Australia. But it's an interesting one, and you sense the WTA, who are very kind of more open and want to ensure their players have the choice and the freedom and the flexibility to play the tournaments wherever they can, that they are able to do that. But as you can imagine, I think like countries and governments, they will make something happen, and then everyone has to fall in line, including tennis tournaments. And I was maybe a little bit surprised by it, but I'm almost like, if a country wants to do that and run that way, and everything has to fall in line now as a result, then players have to maybe respect that. And I think it's almost, fortunate that there are so many tournaments going on at the moment that if, for example, maybe the Prague Open is not an option, I don't feel like you're too far away perhaps from playing another event elsewhere.
Yeah, I think, the WTA rules state that all players should be allowed to compete, based on merit and not discriminated against by nationality. So obviously this goes against WTA rules, but governmental rules will always win out over, a governing body of sport rules. So we'll have to see if, going forward, the Czech Republic might rescind that, or if other countries might adopt it. But I mean, on the same sort of tone with the conflict that's going on, we've had a different sort of attitude from the Washington DC event, City Open, and that is because Svitolina and Azarenka are due to play. They've ended up drawn against each other, and obviously they played each other at Wimbledon. There was quite an awkward ending without a handshake. The crowd then booed Azarenka. So the City Open have decided to avoid this from happening. They're going to make an announcement at the start of the match, just to state that there will not be a handshake at the end, which will hopefully avoid this kind of, unsavoury ending with the players walking off court. Do you think this is a good move? Do you think, they're sort of going with the assumption that the crowd don't necessarily know that Svitolina isn't shaking hands with Russians and Belarusians? Do you think this will help with the crowd's kind of understanding? Joel, you're nodding your head. I take that means you agree.
Yeah, I think this is a very positive action. I think the problem with me that I had with Wimbledon, it was that it assumed that the fans knew the context and knew what was going on, and we saw that very ugly moment of Azarenka gesturing to the fans. They Azarenka and Svitolina had played a fantastic match, probably one of the matches it's going to be one of the matches of the tour this season, and then for her to get booed off, she did not obviously respond very happily to that. So I'm glad we're getting that clarity with the crowd, beforehand, and there are no assumptions being made, because Wimbledon made assumptions and it led to ugly scenes, and here no assumptions are being made, and I hope we can just have a clean tennis match with no handshake at the end, and we all walk off, everyone very, very happy. I think it'll still be interesting to see what the reaction is at the end of the match. There might be people who missed the announcement, for example, but at least I think the event are doing as much as possible to mitigate that outcome.
Yeah. Chris, do you agree with Joel?
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's completely avoidable. The situation that we've seen where, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't, in terms of if you do accept that there's no handshake and you walk to the net first, or then you look like you're not willing to shake the opponent's hand to the audience. Azarenka said after she played Svitolina, I knew there was going to be no handshake. She made it clear she wasn't going to shake my hand. What else could you do? What else could I do in that situation? And I think it is at a point where this is what you can do, is say at the start, there will be no handshake. Because we must have learnt by now that tennis audiences expect a handshake. And it's not because they aren't necessarily the most informed, but because that's what they've become accustomed to. And the nature of Wimbledon and tournaments like that is that you might not follow the tour throughout the entire year, but you definitely do attend those big tournaments. And in the US, where tennis is more of an entertainment than a sporting event at times, I think it is important to make it clear, because it will be something that could escalate quite quickly. So I think this is a good move. I think it's needed. And I think that Svitolina has welcomed it. And I do think that probably Azarenka and her role in the player council probably did help bring about a situation where this will be announced.
Do you think this will be a one-off, or do you think if there are any other matches in the future that there'll be like a blanket announcement, maybe from the chair umpire before, and it becomes more of a routine as opposed to a one-off? Or do you think they'll see maybe use this as the test example and then see how we get on?
Depends how it goes, doesn't it? I mean, if this doesn't go well or doesn't have an impact, then I guess there would be questions. But if you do it more than once, then people will become used to hearing that, and it will start to make more sense to people. So I would stick with it. I think it is needed, because if you're looking at kind of the players where they've all had to sign things to be at Wimbledon to say they do not support the war, and then they're getting booed for not shaking your hand of a player who's not going to shake their hand. It's their every right not to. It's their right to protest.
It's not going anywhere anytime soon, is it?
Exactly, and I think this is something which it does seem odd but necessary, and so I think I'm glad that that they've decided to do this at the City Open. I think it's a good one, because otherwise you see in tournaments like when I was in Boston, where Russian involvement in tournaments can cause some sort of heightened tensions when it comes to those later rounds. And if players play against each other, it's something that all tournaments want to avoid. They want it to run smoothly, so it's in everyone's best interest, not just the players.
Yeah, and it's looking like it's going to be a great event. It's a combined event. The women's draw is loaded. Jessie Pegula.
Can we just appreciate Azarenka Svitolina first round again so soon after that Wimbledon epic? I'm pumped for that.
I know, it's an amazing draw, especially the top bit, because we've got Jessie Pegula, Sophia Kenin in that section. Obviously, I'm intrigued to see what she's going to do after her, few wins at Wimbledon. It's just a loaded draw. Garcia is the second seed down at the bottom of the draw. Coco Gauff's there. Madison Keys, all sorts. So that is a loaded draw. And they've also got, obviously, on the men's side, Andy Murray is there. He's seeded. He's got the winner of, I think, Vukic Nakashima as his opener. Taylor Fritz is the top seed. TFO the second seed. Tons of Americans in the draw, as I'm sure you can expect. But also, both draws, I think, have very
Chris,
good potential.
The draw here is... it's got to be said, it is night and day to that Hamburg 500 draw.
Oh, it really is. It really is. I mean, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, maybe I should start streaming something whilst we finish the podcast off, because Andreescu's on court right now. But no, one thing I was going to say on this draw, and I know that we have talked about quite a lot of issues on the pod, but this is one more thing I'd just like to add, would be that Murray's spoken out about some of the prize money issues that still is ongoing. And although I'm celebrating the fact there is a stacked draw for both the women and the men at this tournament, due to the nature of how the WTA and ATP are set up, the ATP has thresholds of prize money for tournaments of this type. The WTA does not, and Murray kind of brought that into the spotlight this week, because the prize money is very different. So the men's prize for the same tournament, same grounds, same spectators, is over $2 million US dollars, with the winner taking home $350,000. For the women, the pool is $780,000, with the winner taking home $123,000. So I think these events, although it's great for tennis, seeing women's and men's events and seeing such great lineups, it must be very strange to players who are having the same experience, but they're taking home a fraction of what the men are at this event.
It's almost very kind of, we've got the superficial kind of like equality of, there's an ATP 500 alongside a WTA 500. But yeah, for the players, if you scratch the surface and you look at the prize money distribution,
almost.
It's like, it's really different. I mean, I feel like we've seen these inequalities with prize money before, and I just hope when is it going to get sorted? We just keep going on, and I love these combined events, and I think we should have more of them, but I feel like we should only have them if prize money is also committed. There's a commitment, as you said, at least to being equal or at least on some sort of parity.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I mean, let's look at the other events for the week on tour, because we've got Los Cabos, where Stefanos Tsitsipas is the top seed. Cam Norrie's there as the second seed. He loves this draw.
I was going to say, you say the Los Cabos Open. I actually, again, isn't this not the Cam Norrie Open?
He's had great success here, so let's hope for more of the same. Certainly, I hope he can feel nice and back at home on the court.
Tsitsipas definitely got a nice fee, didn't he, to come south of the border to Mexico to play this, I feel, as well. Yeah, and we've also got Kitzbühel still on the clay. Thomas Martin Etcheverry is the top seed there, with Hanfmann, Kachin, Offner. So still down in Austria on the European clay courts. Dominic Thiem, this is his home event. He's there on a wild card. What can he do? To kind of get a few wins under his belt here. He did well at Wimbledon against Tsitsipas, I thought, in that opener. Didn't get the win.
I'm hoping that he can just get some wins. Come on, Dominic Thiem, you can do it. And also the Prague Open, as we just mentioned, which will not be featuring any Russians or Belarusians. That's a WTA 250 on outdoor hard courts.
Heather Watson's there.
Buzkova's there, home event, top seed for home fans. And Lin Zhu of China, second seed. Also, obviously, a load of Czechs in the draw with Noskova.
And Chris, you'll love this. I'm sure you've already noted we've got a lovely lucky loser versus lucky loser spot in the main draw. Hibino of Japan against one of our faves, Sara Irani.
I've already started on the download tennis app. I'm ready for that notification.
We're
it's time
all
to
ready.
Follow the scores.
We're all ready. Yeah, I'm going to be checking on the ace count. No, I'm not. I'm joking. But yes, listeners, I hope you enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours.
We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok and YouTube at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can email the show on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com. And don't forget to check out our website, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back next Monday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our next tour catch-up. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
It's goodbye from Chris.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.